Ya debe estar grabando. Sí, perfecto. Bueno, pues bienvenidos. Bienvenidos a nuestro taller que forma parte de Avance Expo de Conservation Opportunity junto a US Fish and Wildlife Service. Mi nombre es Fabiola Torres, soy la fundadora de Conservation Opportunity y estaré ayudando a moderar el evento de hoy. Un poquito de trasfondo de lo que está ocurriendo hoy. Déjenme contarle primero lo que es Avance Expo. Avance Expo es una serie de talleres de mejoramiento profesional que estarán acompañadas por paneles de carrera. Los temas han sido sobre resumen, carta de presentación, entrevista, LinkedIn. Hoy estaremos hablando sobre resumen federal, navegar USA Jobs, entre otras muchísimas cosas. Entonces, si no han visto los talleres pasados, como carta de presentación y todas esas cositas, vayan a YouTube, ahí están las presentaciones grabadas, también nos pueden escribir en confianza y se las enviamos. Y cada mes también está acompañado por horas de oficina, donde pueden discutir con alguien del equipo de Conservation Opportunity sobre los temas del Expo. Y también nosotros revisamos sus solicitudes de trabajo, así que aprovechen eso. Esas horas de oficina terminan en este mes, así que pendiente, y si no, de todas maneras, aquí calladito entre nosotros, yo felizmente le chequeo de vez en cuando si tengo tiempo para que sean competitivos. Estamos aquí como para ustedes y para que tengan también un poco de información sobre otros invitados que hemos tenido anteriores, para que vayan a YouTube y chequen esas presentaciones. Nosotros hemos tenido a Para Naturaleza, a Environment for the Americas, Hispanic Access Foundation, empleados de LinkedIn, y hoy tenemos a US Fish and Wildlife Service en el taller más extenso que tenemos hasta ahora y más completo. Así que aprovechen, y si se pueden quedar hasta las 2 horas, porque va a ser alrededor de unas 2 horas, van a conocer más sobre US Fish and Wildlife Service, su empleado, escucharán sobre personas que trabajan revisando esas solicitudes de trabajo, hablarán con expertos en el panel de carrera y aquí hay mucha gente representando diversas áreas de US Fish and Wildlife Service. Así que voy a rapidito ahora dejarlos con Terry Whitaker. Importante. Yo voy a hablarles español y voy a hablar inglés de vez en cuando, pero para que sepan, la gran parte de la presentación se va a dar en inglés. Tenemos el beneficio de que somos boricua y o nos defendemos con el Spanglish o tenemos un buen background también dentro de lo que es el segundo idioma de inglés, porque nos enseñan desde chiquitos. Así que tengan quizás timidez con hablar en inglés, mira, lo escriben en español, y aquí hay muchos también empleados de US Fish and Wildlife Service que conocen el idioma, podemos traducir por usted y nos dejan saber cualquier cosita, ¿ok? Estamos aquí para su orden y para que toda esta información la aprovechen. Ahora los dejo con Terry Whitaker.
Fabiola, muchísimas gracias. Buenos días y bienvenidos a nuestro Simposio de Carreras de Conservación. Soy yo, Terry Whitaker, de la Oficina de Diversidad y Gestión Inclusiva de la Fuerza Laboral, also known as the Office of Diversity and Inclusive Workforce Management. También tengo mis compañeros de trabajo. Tenemos Leo Miranda, tenemos Silmarie Padrón, Nicholas Bird, Christopher DeVore, Rhonda Spinks, Sherry Brewer, Carrie Allen, Brian Lee, Monica Williams, Courtney Williams, Rachel McCracken. I think I got everybody. Otra vez, es un placer estar aquí con ustedes y presentarles la información que tenemos. Leo.
Muchas gracias, Terry. Saludos a todos. Mi nombre es Leopoldo Miranda Castro. Soy el director regional del sureste de Estados Unidos en la oficina de Atlanta. Nosotros cubrimos todo el sureste, 10 estados, Puerto Rico e Islas Vírgenes. Así que estaremos hablando un poquito más lueguito, y así que lo paso hacia Silmarie.
Buenos días a todos, bien emocionada de estar aquí. Gracias, Fabiola, por la presentación. Mi nombre es Ilmari Padrón Santiago, soy una de las 3 coordinadoras regionales del programa de Recovery. Trabajamos con todas las oficinas de campo a nivel del sureste, ofreciendo la asistencia a todo lo relacionado a Recovery. Soy natural de Culebra, así que si escuchan un gallo, es que hay gallos por aquí alrededor mío, así que voy a poner el mute mientras no esté hablando. Muy emocionada de estar aquí, gracias.
Nicholas.
Hey everyone, unfortunately I can't speak Spanish, but I'm still very happy to be here. My name is Nick Bird. I work in the Southeast Regional Office in Atlanta with Leo. I came through a student hiring authority called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. I'm currently working as a management analyst / project manager for the Regional Business Office. I'm really happy to be here and look forward to meeting all of you and sharing a little bit about my background and my story through the service.
Thank you, Nick. Christopher.
Hey, good morning. I'm Chris DeVore. I work for our science applications program here in the Southeast as well. I came through 2 different student programs through my 2 different degrees, both the Pathways program and the Director of Fellowship program, which I'm sure we'll be hearing about today. So you'll be hearing more from me, and so I'll keep my introduction short for now.
Thank you. Monica.
Good morning. I'm Monica Williams, and I'm with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, also in the Southeast region. I am stationed at the Santee National Wildlife Refuge in South Carolina, and I started my fish and wildlife journey through a student program called the Student Career Experience Program, and I'm really happy to be here this morning. Good morning, everyone.
Rhonda Spinks.
Me mute myself. Hola, mi nombre es Rhonda Spinks. That's all that I can say in Spanish, but hey, how did I do? I guess, right? Awesome. So I'm also on the outreach team with Terry, and I'm happy to be here. And I started my career off as an intern through the Pathways program.
Awesome, thank you, Rhonda. Sherry.
Hola, buenos dias. Lo siento, no hablas español. So I end my Spanish from there. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Sherry Brewer. I am physically located in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm also one of our workforce diversity specialists that works along with Terry and Rhonda and the others that will introduce themselves in a moment here, but I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you, Sherry. Rachel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel McCracken. My pronouns are she and her. Coming to you from the indigenous lands of the Cheyenne, Sioux, Arapaho, and Ute people in Denver, Colorado area. I am also a recruiter in our Office of Diversity and Inclusive Workforce Management. Glad to be here.
Nice, Rachel. Courtney.
Good morning. I'm Courtney Williams out of the Atlanta Southeastern Region office, and I'm a part of the recruitment team. Thank you for having me today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Brian Lee. I see Brian on there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Lee. I'm with the recruiting team as well. I'm located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's cold up here. It's about 29 degrees. So I wish I was down where you guys are at. But thank you and welcome.
And Mr. Allen, Kerry Allen. I'm going to say hello to everybody.
Yes, thank you, Terry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Allen, and I'm the manager of our services recruitment team. And I just want to, on behalf of the service director, as well as Leo Miranda, the regional director, I want to welcome you all to our symposium. And we ask you all to please just ask the questions, learn what you can from this event, and we hope we give you some good information. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service team. Now to the participants in the symposium, I ask that we'd like to get to know each and every one of you. So if you take the time to introduce yourselves in the chat, just go to the chat and type your name in and let us know what your major is. We'd love to get to know you. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to go to the chat and start introducing yourselves. Hello, Eva, hola. From Caguas. ¿Alguien más? Okay. Oh, Gabriela, hola. Okay, so we'll continue to monitor that. Let everyone have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So so I have some information to provide to everybody. I want to talk a little bit about the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and some of the opportunities that we have, both employment-wise and internship-wise. So I'm gonna queue up this presentation right quick. Got that there. Okay. So for your benefit, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll actually be able to see subtítulos en español for your benefit. So welcome on behalf of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and thank you so much for your interest in learning about our organization. During this presentation, I have an overview of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and our mission, and also to provide you some opportunities on how to join our team. And I'll do my best to answer any questions that you may have. I ask that if you do have questions, type them in the chat, and my team will be monitoring the chat and do their best to answer any questions that you may have. Alrighty, so the mission of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has over 7,000 employees across the United States and U.S. territories, 8 regional offices and headquarters, over 500 wildlife refuges. We've got fish hatcheries and aquatic centers, law enforcement offices, and ecological services offices. So if you give me just a minute of your time, I'd like to show you a short video of some of the wonderful things that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is doing right now. Conserving the nature of America. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is part of the Department of the Interior. And the Department of the Interior plays a central role in how the United States stewards its public lands, increases environmental protections, and pursues environmental justice, and honors our nation-to-nation relationship with tribes. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is joined by colleagues such as the National Park Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and others. We also work with agencies involved in conservation or other agencies involved in environmental conservation, and they include the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Commerce, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and others. So now I'd like to talk to you about some of the major programs within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And two of our larger programs include the National Wildlife Refuge System and Ecological Services. And we're fortunate to actually have representatives from both of those programs with us today to share more information about these programs. But the refuge system manages over 150 million acres of public lands with the primary goal of conserving habitats for the fish and wildlife found on these lands. Refuges also welcomes over 47 million visitors annually. That's a lot of people. Ecological Services is responsible for administering the Endangered Species Act. This means they make decisions about protections and recovery of imperiled species in the ecosystems which may have degraded and led to a population decline. We have the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program. This has 135 offices throughout the country, supports the federal hatchery system where important aquatic dependent species are cultured and managed. This program also plays a large role in aquatic habitat restoration and conservation. We also have the Migratory Birds Program. The Migratory Birds Program works with partners to protect, restore, and conserve bird populations and their habitats for the benefit of future generations. We're also fortunate to have someone from Science Applications, actually in Migratory Birds also, to be able to speak to you today. But our Science Applications program brings partners together to identify shared conservation priorities and deliver scientific information and tools and partnerships needed to achieve conservation goals. Our Wildlife and Sport Fish Restoration Program, or WSFR, works closely with state wildlife agencies to provide grant funding towards development of recreational facilities or educational programming. We also have the Office of Law Enforcement. This office investigates wildlife crimes and ensures compliance with wildlife protection laws. They have strong partnerships with the international conservation community and our tribal and state counterparts to ensure wildlife resources are protected. We have our External Affairs Program. Their responsibilities include communicating our work to congressional audiences, to sharing updates to partners in international governments. They also coordinate our social media presence. We have our Joint Administrative Operations. They provide support across the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And we have the Office of Diversity and Inclusive Workforce Management. This office is responsible for processing discrimination complaints, affirmative employment, special emphasis observances, and program accessibility and targeted outreach. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service strives to promote diversity and inclusion throughout its workforce. Listed here are a few of our leadership and employment teams and the initiatives that are committed to identifying barriers to those diversity goals and promoting an inclusive environment. So you see we have an executive diversity committee, we have a barrier analysis team, we have LGBTQ+ employee resource groups, we have workplace culture transformation teams, internship opportunities, EEO and diversity trainings, diversity and inclusion strategic plans. We've got a lot. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is making strides in the areas of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you ask, how can you be a part of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service family? Is there a place for me? Definitely. So we have, a few programs supported by the Fish and Wildlife Service. Are you studying any of these programs or pursuing a degree in any of this field, such as biological sciences, natural resource management, zoology, ecology, earth sciences. These are some of the majors that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service looks for when recruiting for various careers. So here are some of the career types that we hire for. Park rangers, refuge law enforcement officers, wildlife biologists, wildlife firefighters, accountants, budget analysts, public affairs. So just about almost any degree major or degree field that you're going into, you could probably get a job with the Fish and Wildlife Service or some type of wonderful internship. So here are some of the requirements and qualifications. So many of our positions have education requirements, and this is how human resources qualifies you for a certain series or classification for a job. The Fish and Wildlife Service, operates on a GS scale or general schedule. That's how we're paid. It's the federal government pay scale used to determine the salaries over 70% of the federal civilian workforce. So you may ask, where can you find opportunities to work or volunteer or intern in the Fish and Wildlife Service? Well, we have a website, www.fws.gov/careers. And you can peruse this website to find, like I said, various opportunities from volunteers to internships to full-time employees. And once you have searched through this website and found what you're looking for, it will then take you to the USA Jobs website, which is the federal website to apply for positions. And Rhonda, my colleague, will take you through that process a little bit later in this presentation. But so I won't go through preparing an account or anything like that. Rhonda will cover that for us. But we do have some major internship programs in the Fish and Wildlife Service, such as the Pathways program. There are 3 tiers to the Pathways program. The Pathways program is available throughout many federal agencies, and they're advertised typically on the USA Jobs website. And as a participant in any of these 3 programs, you're paid as a federal employee. So you have the student internship tier, which involves a minimum of 640 hours that you would work as an intern. Eligibility requirements: you have to be a current student, you have to be a US citizen, and have a minimum GPA of 2.0. And after completing your degree and completing the minimum 640 hours, there's a possibility of being converted to a full-time permanent position, which is pretty cool. We have the recent graduates tier, which is a 1-year assignment and is made available to students who have graduated within 2 years of undergraduate or graduate school. And there's potential to be converted to a full-time permanent position as well. And then we have the Presidential Management Fellows tier, and we actually have a person on who's going to speak to you today on behalf of the Presidential Management Fellows program. And so this is a federal 2-year leadership development program for advanced degree candidates, and it has its own set of requirements as well. So I know I'm going through this pretty fast, but if you have any questions, like I said, please type them in the chat, and my team will be monitoring the chat and be able to answer any questions that you may have as we go along. So we have some Fish and Wildlife Service sponsored internship programs as well. And those are monitored by partner organizations. They're typically a summer or a longer term opportunity. Many of them are paid. Some include housing and relocation, not all of them, but some do. And they're managed by a few of the partners that we work with, namely the Student Conservation Association, the Hispanic Access Foundation, MANO project, also the American Conservation Experience. And we have a special hiring authority, the Public Lands Corps hiring authority, that makes it easy to hire participants in these programs after a minimum of 640 hours of internship rendered. We have the Directorate Fellows Program, which in short is a rigorous paid 11-week summer internship opportunity for undergraduate, juniors, and graduate students with a minimum 3.0 GPA. And there's a direct hire authority for 2 years after their graduation period. And we also have the Career Discovery Internship Program. Monica talked about her experience with the CDIP program, and it's an exploratory entry-level program. It's an 11-week paid summer internship for undergraduate, freshmen, and sophomores. And I've included the link to find those opportunities. And as Fabiola said earlier, this presentation and the PowerPoints will be available to you, so you can access these links and look for information. So there's also the opportunity to volunteer with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Volunteering is always an option. Many of our field offices and refuges always welcome, and they need volunteers like yourself to do all kinds of work. This is a great low commitment way to meet folks, learn about the work that we do in the Fish and Wildlife Service, and figure out whether you'd like to apply for more in-depth paid positions. We have some handouts that will provide more information about that. So as I said, I went through this pretty quickly, and I threw a whole bunch of information out at you, but here's a nice chart put together to summarize what opportunities we have available and what level in your educational career could you qualify for any of these opportunities. So it goes from freshman, undergraduate, all the way to within 2 years of graduating, and then explaining everything from the CDIP program to the PMF, which is the Presidential Management Fellows Program, to our volunteers program. So overall, I'd like to share some tips or some strategies for success. And remember, any experience you have as a student or someone currently in the workforce can lead to employment after you graduate. Seek out information about Fish and Wildlife Service and its opportunities. I gave you some websites, and my next slide, I'll have all of those websites listed for your convenience. Complete thorough and detailed resumes and cover letters. Build a network. Always take the opportunity to network and meet people along the way. You never know what kind of opportunity will come out as a result of that. And treat any job or volunteer opportunity as if it's an interview. It gives the persons for which you're working an opportunity to evaluate your work ethic, to evaluate how you approach various situations. So you can actually look at it as your living, breathing interview. So as I said, here's some information, here's some websites to find more information about the Fish and Wildlife Service. Our main website, www.fws.gov. We have our careers website, so that's fws.gov/careers. There's a link to the USA Jobs website, our volunteer website, our Diversity Joint Venture. And then also we have an opportunity for you to sign up. We have a a contact list, a distribution list, if you will, where you're able to provide us your information, and we'll certainly provide you information on opportunities as they become available within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And if you have any questions, you can always email us. We have a dedicated email box where we answer questions, and that's listed at the bottom of this screen. And with that, I thank you. Muchísimas gracias por su interés in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Do we have any questions? Let's see, my team has been monitoring the chat, so I'll stop for a couple of minutes. As I was giving the presentation, I could not see the chat. So do we have any questions, or did we get any questions? Thank you, Rachel. Rachel posted a link or more information about the Pathways program. Thank you for that. Oh, we do have a question from Alexander. Thank you for that question. If one were to apply, would they have to pay for travel? So I'm assuming you're asking, would you as the applicant have to pay for your travel to and from your work site? I'll answer that question from that perspective. So depending on the program, there are opportunities for the Fish and Wildlife Service to pay for travel expenses to and from your home to your work site. It's dependent on the program, but mainly like the CDIP program and the Directorate Fellows program have opportunities to pay for travel to and from your work site. Let's see, we have another question. I have a bachelor's degree from a long time ago. I can apply, or can I apply for a basic position or volunteer? The short answer to that is yes, you can apply. You can create a profile on USA Jobs and search for opportunities that you may be interested in, and you could possibly qualify with your educational requirements. And you could certainly also volunteer. We have that link for volunteer opportunities as well. And let's see, are there job opportunities for people who currently are not students with backgrounds in business or program management? So again, the short answer to that is there are always employment opportunities. I would invite you to create a profile on USA Jobs, search those opportunities, and you can put in your specific qualifications and find out if there's something out there for you. Let's see, we've got another question. Can a soil scientist qualify for any of the programs? Most definitely. So as I talked about the mission of the Fish and Wildlife Service to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats. So that and their habitats, we do lots of work to manage the land or the habitat on which the wildlife exists. So we certainly need professionals with that type of expertise to manage those lands. So most definitely. And you're welcome. So Sherry just posted a quick link to current positions in the Fish and Wildlife Service on USA Jobs. Thank you, Sherry, for that. Do we have any more questions?
Carrie, this is Carrie. Let me jump in and just add a little more to a couple of the questions.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of questions refer reference to I guess, a specific job, or does it have travel? Best advice that we can give everyone is on any vacancy announcement, it's going to provide everything about that position. Now, the question that was asked, I don't know if I really understood it. Was it saying that if a job is located in this particular city, and how do I get there from my location? Would they relocate me? That would be listed in the position. Most likely, in most cases, not. But if it is, it was stated in the vacancy announcement. It would say relocation expenses will be paid. As far as local travel to and from work, and I think Terry gave an example, but I'm going to say for the most part, that's on the employee. Once you're hired, you're expected to report for duty because you're within a local area of travel. So if you're 30 to 45 minutes from the job, no, we do not pay for you to come in to work. But there is opportunities like programs like subsidy programs and things like that. If that organization program has a subsidy program where they'll pay a certain percentage of the, for example, if you have like train or bus fare or things like that, that part would be covered. And that's what Terry was referring to. The other thing, as far as questions on things like, do they have opportunities for business or IT or any other administrative? Every organization has these programs. It's not the most prevalent opportunities because we are a conservation organization, but we do have administrative programs. We have we need folks who are in contracting, business, IT, human resources. So we have programs that support the entire Fish and Wildlife Service. Those opportunities may not be as prevalent as the science opportunities, but they're out there. And the link that was provided by Sherry, thank you, that gives you the link to all current jobs that are out there for U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And you just have to monitor that every few days, every week, and opportunities will be available. And as Terry has stated, get on our listserv and you'll receive messages on a consistent basis on providing a link to all current jobs. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Carrie. That question, yeah, could be interpreted, several different ways. So thank you for that additional information. We got a question from Carlos. Are there opportunities for people who are more comfortable speaking Spanish? So we do have opportunities, internship opportunities and employment opportunities where there may be particular assignments that are, say, like a targeted outreach assignment for a particular demographic. So if we're conducting a program where it's reaching out or targeting the Spanish-speaking public, then certainly there's opportunities for Spanish speakers to come in. We have a lot of our wildlife refuges and even ecological services offices in areas where Spanish is the predominant language spoken. So yes, there are opportunities to have employment where you are comfortable speaking Spanish. One more question. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Nick. Nick said he's happy to meet with anyone after the presentation to hear about their current situation and interests and help them better understand steps that they can take to reach their goals. There are so many opportunities and paths, so feel free to email me, and he's listed his email address. Thank you, Nicholas, for that. And Rachel, thank you so much. For federal jobs, there's a filter for jobs that offer relocation assistance. Click more filters, then the checkbox next to offers relocation assistance. Then select the vacancy announcement to read exactly what is offered. Thank you, Rachel, for that. That backs up what Carrie mentioned about the specific job announcement and what information is included in those job announcements, be it a full-time position or an internship position. Okay, do we have another question? I'll open the floor for one more question before we transition to our career panel and hearing about the wonderful people we have working in the Fish and Wildlife Service, and you'll have an opportunity to hear more about them. So one more question. Da, 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 da. Okay. All righty. Well, we'll move along. Thank you for those questions. And if any of you have any additional questions, please feel free to type them into the chat. And like I said, my team will be monitoring the chat and will best answer your questions as they come. So at this time, this is an awesome portion of the symposium where we get to showcase, or even more showcase, the great things that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is doing and the people who are doing those great things. So we've put together a career panel for you, and each of these individuals is going to have the opportunity to introduce themselves again, tell you about their conservation journey, their educational background, how they got where they are in their careers today, and then even offer some career advice for you. And please feel free. This is an open discussion, so I'd love to get some questions, and you can just turn your mic on if you have a question and direct it to each of the panelists to ask them questions. So we have Leo Miranda, we have Nicholas Bird, and Marie Padron. Proceed.
Gracias, Terry. I'll start here. Saludos a todos y bienvenidos y gracias por participar. De nuevo, mi nombre es Leopoldo Miranda Castro. Soy el director regional del sureste de Estados Unidos, desde la oficina de Atlanta, Georgia. Nosotros cubrimos 10 estados, desde Carolina del Norte hasta Luisiana, desde Kentucky hasta Florida, y luego viajando un poquito más al sur, Puerto Rico e Islas Vírgenes. La región nuestra tiene alrededor de 1,300 empleados y somos prácticamente la región más grande en toda la nación. De esos 1,300 empleados, también tenemos 131 refugios de vida silvestre nacionales a través de toda la región. Unas 14 fish hatcheries y por lo menos 1 o 2 oficinas de servicios ecológicos en cada uno de los estados y el Caribe. Así que hay bastantes oportunidades para entrar al Fish and Wildlife Service, tanto en la parte de ciencia como en la parte administrativa, ingeniería y muchas otras ramas. Ahora estamos incluyendo científicos sociales para poder manejar los recursos. Eso es un ejemplo cómo la agencia está evolucionando para poder responder al manejo de los recursos mucho más efectivamente. Un poquito de la historia mía, soy boricua, nacido y criado entre los campos cuando eran campos, en Guaynabo y Orocovi. Mi familia es de Orocovi. Estudié en el Colegio Universitario Humacao, biología marina. De ahí salí para hacer mi maestría en la Universidad de Carolina del Norte, en Raleigh, con el doctor Jaime Collazo. Así que es uno de mis mentores. Todavía sigue allí en Raleigh y ha trabajado con muchos estudiantes de Puerto Rico. Ahí comencé, mi primer trabajo fue, si ven el background mío, es el Refugio de Vida Silvestre Cabo Rojo, las Salinas de Cabo Rojo. Ahí fue mi primer trabajo, como un GS5 de biólogo de terrenos privados, ayudando a los agricultores y muchos dueños de terrenos privados restaurar y manejar su hábitat de vida silvestre. A través de eso, esta agencia ha sido excelente en cuanto a oportunidades de desarrollo. Así que luego de unos añitos en Puerto Rico e Islas Vírgenes, pude ir a un trabajo. Mi primer trabajo fuera de Puerto Rico fue en la oficina de Washington, D.C. y con el mismo programa. Y eso fue lo que me abrió muchas puertas en cuanto a conocer la agencia, los diferentes programas de la agencia e interactuar a una escala bien diferente, porque trabajando primero desde Puerto Rico, luego a nivel nacional, eso me abrió los ojos mucho. Y no me quejo. Ahí fue donde perdí el pelo, pero no me quejo. Otra de las cosas, de ahí me fui para la oficina del Chesapeake Bay en Annapolis, Maryland. Ahí estuve unos cuantos años trabajando en el programa de servicios ecológicos. Y hace 11 años atrás vine para la región como asistente del director regional para servicios ecológicos. Todo lo que tiene que ver con Endangered Species Act, el programa de terrenos privados y muchos otros. Y 3 años y medio atrás fue que tuve la oportunidad de solicitar el trabajo de director de la región y pues tuve la suerte de tener ese trabajo y ya ahora llevo 3 años y medio y ha sido una de las mejores experiencias porque no solamente trabajando en una región tan y tan diversa a nivel de biodiversidad y a nivel de cultura, es increíble. Es un honor poder ser el director de la región. Y una de mis metas como director regional es contratar a la gran mayoría de los estudiantes, especialmente las minorías, para poder tener una representación más natural, más relacionada a cómo nuestras comunidades se ven. Y Puerto Rico es un área de especial atención, no solamente porque yo soy boricua, pero por experiencia propia sé que podemos tener e influenciar la agencia y la conservación a nivel no solamente de Puerto Rico, sino a nivel de toda la nación y hasta internacional. Así que podemos tener esa influencia y traer mucha más gente, mucho más talento para dentro de la agencia. Así que una de las cosas que yo les pido a todos ustedes es que se mantengan en contacto. Hay muchas oportunidades. Nosotros no somos una agencia grande, pero sí tenemos oportunidades a través del año con los programas de internado, como Terry dijo, y también como la parte de empleo como tal. Una de las cosas que los quiero dejar y pasarlo al próximo panelista es darle la bienvenida de nuevo a todos ustedes y por favor manténganse en contacto. Me pueden contactar directamente. Ahorita pongo mi email en el chat y cuenten con nuestro apoyo y vamos a echar para adelante. Así que con eso lo pasaré, creo que a Silmarí, ¿right?
Ok.
Gracias.
Gracias, Leo. Y buenos días a todos nuevamente. Mi nombre, como les mencioné al principio, es Silmarí Padrón. Les mencioné que trabajo para la División de Servicios Ecológicos, que Terry mencionó lo que hacemos. Somos los que manejamos la ley de especie en peligro de extinción a nivel regional. Particularmente trabajo en la División de Recuperación de Especies, así que mi mayor función es trabajar con las oficinas que Leo menciona, todos esos estados que tenemos en nuestra región del sureste, es ofrecerle asistencia técnica y ayudarlos en todas las acciones y actividades de recuperación para nuestras especies listadas a nivel del sureste y trabajar con otros. Un poco sobre mí, yo soy natural de Culebra. Crecí en esta isla donde estamos rodeados por naturaleza, donde tenemos unas playas espectaculares y pues unas especies de vida silvestre hermosísimas, ¿no? Pues tuve la oportunidad de bien pequeña, está saliendo un avión y todo esto es bien pequeño, así que van a escuchar quizás el avión. Tuve la oportunidad de bien pequeña poder participar y trabajar como voluntaria, y esto es bien importante para todos ustedes como estudiantes, y vi que muchos de ustedes también han tenido la oportunidad de trabajar de voluntario en otros proyectos. Pues tuve la oportunidad de muy pequeña trabajar de voluntaria en uno de los refugios más antiguos que tiene el servicio. Somos el tercer refugio más antiguo, que es el de Culebra, Culebra National Wildlife Refuge. Comencé ahí como estudiante con pues, diferentes amigos de escuela, ayudando para trabajar en patrullaje de tortugas marinas, ayudando a todas estas personas que venían a hacer investigación de diferentes partes del mundo a nuestra islita para trabajar con aves marinas migratorias. Ahí conocí a Leopoldo también cuando él era estudiante que venía y cuando trabajaba con la agencia que venía a ayudarnos a trabajar también con aves migratorias. Así que toda esa oportunidad de trabajar con diferentes personas me hicieron pues reafirmar mi pasión por la conservación, no solo porque era el patio de mi casa, sino también porque me apasionaba trabajar y estar en contacto con la naturaleza desde bien pequeña. Así que mientras estudié, hice mi bachillerato en la Universidad del Turabo, ahora lo que se conoce como Sistema Ana G. Méndez. Hice mi bachillerato ahí en biología, en ciencias naturales, y mientras estaba estudiando, pues se ofrece la oportunidad de poder solicitar el programa de estudiante SCEP, que ahora se llama Pathways. Solicité el programa de SCEP gracias a mentores que tuve en el camino mientras estudiaba. Eso también es bien importante y sé que vamos a hablar más adelante de eso. Tuve esa bendición de contar con mentores en mi camino que me ayudaron a poder llenar esa solicitud, así como Fabiola me le menciona a ustedes, que utilicen estos recursos, utilícenlos, porque para mí eso fue una gran ventaja poder contar con estas personas. Pude solicitar al programa de estudiantes para ese entonces, no lo teníamos en Puerto Rico, así que hice mi programa de estudiante en Luisiana. Trabajé en Luisiana mientras estudiaba, pues viajaba. En ese entonces mi programa pues sí pagaba el viaje, ¿no? Hasta Luisiana y regresar a Puerto Rico para completar mi bachillerato. Una vez completo mi bachillerato, paso, como dijo Terry ahorita en sus programas, esto tiene mucha relación en su presentación. Una vez termino mi bachillerato y hago obviamente un buen performance durante mi tiempo de estudiante, me convierten a empleada de la agencia en Luisiana. Les voy a ser bien honesta, yo en ese entonces no teníamos aparato electrónico como esto, que podía poner rápido para dónde voy, dónde queda Sabine National Wildlife Refuge en Luisiana. Así que yo no tenía idea de dónde me estaban enviando y fue una bendición porque ha sido una de mis mejores experiencias dentro del servicio. Trabajé en Luisiana como biotech, como un GS3. De ahí iba a estar solamente un año, me fascinó, me quedé 3 años. Luego regreso a Puerto Rico porque hubo una oportunidad de una posición en Puerto Rico para trabajar con la División de Especies en Peligro de Extinción. Ahí trabajé con el tremendo equipo de trabajo aquí en el Caribe, trabajando, revisando proyectos de desarrollo, que no tuvieran impacto a nuestras especies y a su hábitat, y estuve haciendo eso por 3 o 4 años, hasta que Leopoldo sale de Puerto Rico hacia DC, donde él dice que perdió parte de su cabello, y yo pues paso a la posición que él tenía de administrar un programa de coordinador para trabajar con dueños de terrenos privados aquí en el Caribe. Igual, cada posición que he tenido ha sido bien gratificante para mí. Esa posición me dio la oportunidad de conocer una gama totalmente distinta a lo que yo estudié, ¿verdad? Lo que yo pensé que iba a ser lo que yo estudié. En ese entonces trabajaba con dueños de terrenos privados en el centro de la isla principalmente, en donde teníamos la iniciativa de implementar el modelo de café bajo sombra. Así que trabajé con agricultores de Puerto Rico en el centro de la isla, chica como yo de playa, en el centro de la isla, quedé enamoradísima de ese tipo de interacción trabajando con otro Puerto Rico para mí, ¿no? Así que esa posición me dio esa oportunidad de poder interactuar con otras personas, poder trabajar en grupo, en alianzas, y eso ha sido una de las pasiones más grandes y lo que mi agencia de verdad impulsa, que es el trabajar con otros. Y ese programa pues me ayudó a poder reforzar esa parte de trabajar, crear esta confianza que toma un poco de tiempo tenerla entre todos, ¿no? Trabajando para un mismo fin. Después de esa posición paso a la Oficina Nacional, al branch de restauración de hábitat para trabajar con el programa costero. De nuevo, esto pues nosotros siempre estamos pensando en nuestra área, ¿verdad? Que nuestro mundo, o sea, nuestro universo es Puerto Rico, pues estamos aquí, pero el universo es infinito y tenemos miles de posibilidades y oportunidades. Y cuando llegué a nivel nacional, me di cuenta que todo lo que hacemos nosotros, ¿verdad? Tanto aquí en el Caribe como en cada uno de nuestros estados, es sumamente importante para lo que hacemos a nivel nacional, a nivel macro, hasta para nuestro presupuesto, a nivel de agencia, para poder establecer estos tipos de programas para estudiantes. Todo es sumamente importante lo que hacemos en cada uno de nuestras oficinas. Así que me dio esa oportunidad de ver un Fish and Wildlife totalmente distinto a nivel macro, el beneficio de todo lo que hacemos en campo, cómo eso se proyecta a nivel nacional. Totalmente distinto a lo que yo pensaba, así que fue una experiencia sumamente gratificante. De ahí bajo un poco de nuevo al sur, me mudo para Atlanta. Ahí estuve trabajando en la oficina regional bajo el programa de servicios ecológicos también, como asistente de la supervisora que supervisaba varias oficinas del sureste de Estados Unidos, incluyendo el Caribe. Ahí estuve como 3 años ayudando a pues, establecer procesos para facilitar la comunicación, procesos principalmente de documentos que revisábamos para que fuera un poco más rápido y poder proveerle una mejor asistencia a nuestras oficinas de campo. Ahí estuve como 3 o 4 años y mi última posición antes de moverme a otro lado fue como Chief of Staff de la División de Servicios Ecológicos bajo Leopoldo Miranda. Ahí fue donde mi cabello no lo perdí, pero sí se empezó a poner gris. Así que estuve como Chief of Staff de Leopoldo por lo menos 1 año y medio, creo, antes de mudarme nuevamente para Puerto Rico. Por situación personal, pues regreso a Puerto Rico y cambio de agencia. Y cambié de Fish and Wildlife Service al Departamento de Agricultura con NRCS, el Natural Resource Conservation Services. Y ahí estuve trabajando como 5 o 6 años como asistente del director de Estado para la división de manejo y estrategia. Me moví de la parte de conservación más tangible, ¿verdad? A lo que yo llamo más administrativo. Estaba más administrativo en San Juan, trabajando con esta agencia, lo cual también fue sumamente gratificante y lleno de retos porque tuvimos apagones, tuvimos paros nacionales, tuvimos huracanes, terremotos, pandemia, y eso me ayudó muchísimo a poder ser más estratégico ante todas las situaciones y ser más resiliente en todos los aspectos, no solamente la parte de conservación, sino también la parte administrativa. Así que esa oportunidad para mí también pues, fue bien importante, como yo digo siempre, cuando hago cualquier trabajo, es pensando en el portfolio, cómo yo sigo llenando otras áreas dentro de mi portfolio y resumen cuando uno pues, está pensando en su carrera. Trabajé de ahí 6 años, después me muevo a Fan Service Agency por 1 año y medio, trabajando como la asistente del director ejecutivo también de la agencia. Esa es la oficina de asistencia al agricultor. Y todavía sentía que tenía esa desconexión, aún siendo agencias de conservación, tenía esa desconexión de lo que de la me apasionaba, que es la conservación. Así que se ofrece la oportunidad de solicitar una posición nuevamente en Fish and Wildlife Service y solicito, y gracias a Dios pues regresé a lo que yo considero mi casa a nivel profesional. Me siento que esta es mi casa profesional en todos los aspectos, tanto porque crecí en esta agencia como profesional, llevo ya 22 años con el gobierno, este año cumplo los 22, pero también porque su misión sí es tangible, o sea, trabajar con otros es parte importante para poder lograr todo lo que nosotros hacemos, que es conservar al final del día, ¿verdad?, especies y su hábitat, pero solos no podemos. Así que para mí eso ha sido una de las partes más gratificantes en mi carrera, el poder trabajar con otros, poder trabajar en diferentes divisiones. Yo tengo un mentor que está en este panel que me decía, las oportunidades se aprovechan y después vamos a ver cómo solucionamos el cómo lo hacemos. Así que eso es una de mis recomendaciones a cada uno de ustedes, aprovechar cada oportunidad que se nos aparece en el camino, porque sé que podemos lograrlo al final del día. Así que y si no, tenemos una ventaja de que esto es una agencia diversa, diferentes programas, diferentes iniciativas y muchas oportunidades. Así que no le tengan miedo, a todo lo contrario. Y con eso los dejo y de ahí paso a Nick.
Sí, Mari, muchísimas gracias por todo.
De nada.
Well, it's going to be tough to follow Leo and Silmarie, but both those are fantastic folks. I get to work with both of them on at least a weekly basis, and they're a wealth of knowledge. So if you all have a chance to reach out to them and learn from them, it'll be a great experience. I'll do my best to kind of follow that up. I'm not so far removed from the seats that you all are currently sitting in. I just finished my graduate degree about 2 years ago, and my undergraduate degree a bit longer than that, maybe about a decade ago. But I'm going to share some part of my intro. I want to make it more of a story format, where I kind of want to talk to you about where I was at when I was getting my undergraduate degree, kind of my thoughts through that process, and a lot of the mistakes I made, and maybe some advice and perspective on how to fail forward and take opportunities, network and use those opportunities to learn and grow and develop and meet new folks, to eventually find yourself in a great career that you truly love. So to start with, once again, my name's Nick. I'm a management analyst / project manager for the Fish and Wildlife Service in the Southeast region. As you'll hear through my intro, and as you can probably tell from my title, I have a pretty non-traditional path to the Fish and Wildlife Service. And I saw someone earlier asked about having a background in business or program management. So I have absolutely zero experience education-wise in terms of conservation. I mean, I have my bachelor's degrees in biology, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it was more pre-med focused and not necessarily conservation focused. But I get a chance to work with folks who are biologists and conservationists on a daily basis, and I get to work in more of a business sense. So I hope to give maybe some perspective for some of you who either aren't in a biology focused degree but still think you're interested in working for the Fish and Wildlife Service, and kind of demonstrate some of the opportunities and maybe the path to get there that way. And also, just in general, I mean, I know I'm here representing the Fish and Wildlife Service, but I hope my story just kind of gives you some perspective on how to think about graduating with your undergraduate degree, and maybe some steps and some important things you can think about as you graduate and you look towards how to establish yourself as a professional and find yourself into an interesting career. So I'll start with my undergraduate degree. I got my undergraduate degree in Charlotte, North Carolina. I graduated in 2014, and that degree was a double major in biology and psychology. And like I mentioned prior, my initial intent was to go to either be pre-med or go to PA school. I really didn't know, and I'm sure you guys can relate to this, but part of my undergraduate experience was thinking like, all right, I'm early 20s. I got to figure out a job that I'm going to enjoy. I got to figure out a job that's going to pay the bills, and a job that is in demand, right? It's a job that I can actually find something in that's going to pay well, do at some point. Is I go to Google and I type in what college degrees pay the most, right? Or what jobs pay the most out of college, right? So here I am at probably 20 years old, and I'm sorting through all these degrees, trying to figure out, what degree should I pursue? So, I saw healthcare was a really interesting degree. So I had a lot of job opportunity and decent pay. So I'm thinking, maybe I'll go into nursing, maybe I'll go into pre-med or something like that. But I really like psychology, so maybe I'll tack that on and, hopefully find some interest in there. What you're learning from this story is at the age of 20 or 21, I wasn't the most future forward thinking student. I was ready to get done with school. I was ready to get done with school, get in the workforce, make a living, start a family, and move on. And I just wanted to, what was the quickest and easiest path to do that? And as you'll learn through my story, that perspective changed quite a bit, and I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. But all that to say is I ended up graduating with that degree and ended up actually getting a nursing degree with those requirements. And I spent my first year out of college as a nurse in Charlotte and working in the emergency room. And I love nurses and appreciate nurses, and they are truly a wonderful group of human beings. If any of you are interested in that career field, I highly suggest it. But it wasn't for me. I really did not enjoy my job as a nurse. I felt like my skills and strengths were better served elsewhere. So I did the unthinkable, which is something I said I would never do. Is at 23, I suppose, I moved from Charlotte. I moved back to my little tiny hometown, which is a little town in Western North Carolina outside of Asheville. I moved back in with my parents. I had to take a step back and think, well, I just spent 4 years getting a degree that I no longer want to use for a job. What the heck am I going to do, right? So now I'm in this situation where I kind of feel like a failure. I was always like a very high performer in high school and, good grades and whatnot, but I had no clue what I wanted to do from there. So I got a job at a local gym as a personal trainer. I liked to exercise. I liked fitness. It was something I was interested in. It didn't pay hardly anything at all. A lot of work for a little bit of money, but I knew it was something I liked. That's something I could spend time doing that I wouldn't, hate doing. And I still had plenty of time to spend with, friends. And I had a moment. I'm not promising all of you will have one of these life-turning, weird little interactions, but I had a moment where one of my old friends from high school came in, and she had just finished her degree at like Chapel Hill in North Carolina. and had just started her job as I think she was starting PA school or something. And she had told me, she was like, Nick, what are you doing now? And I was kind of like, oh, well, this is what I'm doing. I'm the minimum wage personal trainer at like a local gym, right? And she said something like, she's like, wow, Nick, I really always, you were always so smart. I really thought you had more potential than that. I really thought you were going to do more with yourself than this. And not to say that what I was doing, was wrong or anything, but that kind of had like an odd impact on me, where I really thought about it. And I said, here I am, 23. I kind of wasted my college years thinking that, I was just going to follow money, or I was just going to follow, like what jobs were in demand. And I never actually took stock in what things give me energy, or what things I'm motivated to do, or what things I'm passionate about or interested in, and could find ways to monetize those interests instead of just trying to find what Google tells me is the best thing to do with my degree. So after that, it really motivated me. So part of the gym I worked at was associated with a hospital, and obviously I had my nursing degree, and they had a community health branch. They did diabetes education, community outreach, things like that, to work with folks within Western North Carolina. And I went to them and I just pitched them on my degree and my personal training experience that, hey, I have this experience. I have this background in this degree. I think I'm very suited for a position in community health. And right now I see a big deficit in your programming that's not reaching out to folks who are actually in the community. Everything requires them to come to you in the hospital, and I want to do something different. I want to take the hospital to the community, and through community outreach and diabetes education and exercise and nutrition education. And they love the idea. And I'll stop there for a second and give you one. I'll give you little pointers along the way, maybe. But one pointer is that when you graduate, you can't expect to get your degree and say, why aren't employers lining up at my door to hire me and pay me buttloads of money, right? So they don't know who you are. They don't know where you're at, right? You have to go find those opportunities. You have to find ways to use your interest and connect with folks and to network with folks. So one of the first lessons I really learned was how important it was to step out of my comfort zone and go find places I thought I could make a difference in, and be creative and see problems that existed in my community or in my area, and think, do I have a solution? Do I have skills or interests that could solve that problem? And then pitch that to somebody. So the worst they can say is no, right? And the best they can say is yes. And now you have an interesting career that you never would have imagined didn't know existed before you started pursuing it. So here I am, I'm probably 24 now. I've started doing still pretty low paid job where I'm doing community health education, diabetes education in the Asheville area. And so this job was really interesting. I met a lot of really interesting folks. I got really tied into the community, and this just keeps going on into the networking ideas. I really met a lot of really interesting people. I met people who worked at the hospital, people who worked for nonprofits, people who worked in city, local, county government, and all sorts of folks who thought what I was doing was kind of interesting, and they wanted it for themselves. So one of the small towns in Western North Carolina had a big grant, and they wanted to hire a workplace wellness kind of program manager. They wanted someone who'd go to workplaces and they could look at workplaces and they could see, like what problems exist, what resources we have that we can take to the workplaces. We have all these folks working in manufacturing factories, and they have poor health outcomes. They're dying at a much faster rate than the average American is. I worked in West Virginia with like coal miners, which experience very similar health outcomes. So, it was how do we figure out a solution to do this? And they were looking for someone who had a very unique skill set, who could kind of fit that need and take this program and build it from scratch and then lead on with it. So at 24, I said yes. They handed me the keys to I think a $825,000 grant and said, we want you to build a program from square one, from the ground up. So I was scared to death. I really didn't have any experience doing this, but I was motivated. I was ambitious. I really wanted to learn. I wanted to make something for myself and find something I was passionate in. And, and to this point, still keep in mind that, I don't really know where my passions are. I don't know what my interests are. I'm just kind of following, interesting things that are coming up. And what I started to learn is that, you don't have to be passionate about a topic or a subject. You don't have to say, you don't have to be, 20 and be thinking in college, like, man, I got to find this one subject that I'm really, really passionate about and pursue that. What I was learning is I was passionate about building things. I was passionate about, about solving problems. I was passionate about finding momentum and about community organizing and meeting new people and finding interesting ways to connect folks and help people who had health disparities. And all these things sort of kind of coalescing into this kind of job path I found myself on. So as part of that, so I gave it my all. I still wasn't making a lot of money. It's still a nonprofit grant funded position, but I really enjoyed what I was doing, and had so much fun and so much success doing that. I ended up getting to asked to speak at a CDC sponsored event at multiple events across North Carolina, and here I am starting to finally feel some of that feeling of fulfillment. I'm starting to feel excited about my career and the path it's going. But to get to grad school, and hopefully Terry and Fabiola aren't going to kill me for sharing all this seemingly non-related fish and wildlife story. I promise there's a point to this. I ended up pursuing a master's degree at Clemson University in South Carolina because as part of this program and work I was doing, I kept noticing there was all these questions. And when I would go to employers and I would ask, can we change this policy, or why are employees doing this, or how come we can't get folks to be healthy, or why are folks leaving so frequently from their jobs, or how come people don't seem to be engaged? How come whenever we have these events, no one comes to them? No one seems to actually care. They're kind of coming in, clocking out, and going home. And I had all these questions stirring in my head and didn't have a lot of good answers. I mean, I had some thoughts, I had some opinions, but here I am, I'm 25, 26 years old. Who am I to sit here and try to, answer all these major questions these paid professionals can't figure out themselves. So I knew to find more answers to these questions, I was gonna have to do something else and get more education. So I ended up deciding, the best path forward was to apply to grad school. Initially, I went to get a PhD. So I actually got accepted to Clemson's PhD program in organizational behavior, which is, if you're not familiar with that degree, it's essentially a form of management which focuses on how humans behave within an organization. So it's, what makes people tick, what makes people happy, what makes people, be motivated to come to their job and work effectively. How do we organize groups to be most effective, to utilize everyone's skills and interests and whatnot to achieve a larger mission or a larger goal for the organization. And so part of that PhD was very practical. So while I was doing a lot of theory and research within the schooling aspect, I was also working with one of my advisors, was actually a consultant for a lot of companies in the South Carolina area. And I got to do a lot of work with folks out in the field. I was consulting. I was helping managers create new plans. I was doing assessments for workplaces and for large places like Bank of America, for example, was one folk I got to consult for. So I learned a lot of really interesting insights at those kind of positions like that. And I ended up doing some work for some local governments in North Carolina, South Carolina, and really loved local government. I loved the aspect that I felt like I was really making a difference. I was really having an impact on not only the government employees, but that had a direct impact on policy. That had a direct impact on how they treated the county or the city or the region in which they were serving. So it really got me in touch with a lot of folks who are working in government, and it made me think, how can I do what I'm doing? How can because I don't want to do a PhD anymore. I mean, the research, the theory is interesting. I like it, but I'm passionate about doing things. I'm passionate about being in the field or working with folks and building strategies and processes and solving problems and building programs and managing programs. So how do I get involved with a government agency that has a very large impact, a very large ability to influence and to make changes that can possibly affect folks and still do things I'm interested in? And that's kind of where the Presidential Management Fellowship came up. I was in my second year of my master, at this point a master's degree now, and I saw the Presidential Management Fellowship program pop up. I'd never even considered really a position with federal government before, but I saw that and I read into it and it was really interesting. I really like the idea that the PMF program it's 2 years. It's for advanced degree holders, and it's a very intricate program where you go to this program to be a leader. You go to this program because you want to eventually have a leadership position in the federal government, and this is essentially a track to help you do that. You come in right after your master's degree, your PhD, and then you get all this wonderful professional development experience. You get great mentors all throughout the region. And a lot of times, and I'm sure Leo could speak to this, you get a lot of autonomy. So when I joined the service, I was immediately given access to leading multiple projects and multiple programs and leading teams and whatnot, which has been incredible for my my learning and development thus far. But just to backtrack really quick, back to applying for the Presidential Management Fellowship, the Presidential Management Fellowship. So I applied for this program, and this will answer some questions for you guys too, just in case you're curious about the PMF program. So I applied for this in October of 2019. I got accepted on Thanksgiving, and if you get accepted as a finalist for the PMF program, essentially you're opened up to the entire federal government. So I was immediately hit with postings from the CDC, the NIH, Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, NASA, I mean, all these folks have positions posted on the PMF portal that you can apply for and choose from. And none of them felt right. Obviously I wanted a job. I needed a job at the time, but I ended up working for about 6 months doing city planning and waiting for a position in the PMF program to open up. And eventually I saw a position in the Southeast for the Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'd done plenty of interviews throughout the country and other programs. And my interview with the Fish and Wildlife Service was just instantly different. I swear I'm not saying this. I'm not getting paid to say this. It was you could just immediately tell a different cultural fit with the Fish and Wildlife Service than I was getting with a lot of other positions I'd applied for. I was worried about, it being such a conservation focused program, an agency, like, am I going to have a fit there? Being a business student, who has this kind of business organization background. I have no background in conservation or biology. Are they going to want someone like me to come do this kind of position? And immediately I got a great sense of culture, a great open-mindedness. Everyone sees everyone's strengths, values, and what they kind of bring to the table. And so Mara Lopez is our regional business advisor. She was my primary supervisor and main interviewer. And we immediately hit it off. She was very, interested in my background. She also comes from a non-traditional, biology background. So it was an incredibly strong, immediate impression. I got to meet folks like Leo and Mike Ecker, our Leo's assistant in the region. And, everyone just was so nice and so welcoming and immediately made me feel very, very at home. And so once I started, my position as a management analyst / project manager. So what that looks like is I essentially hold a lot of the projects and programs that come out of the Southeast region that serve our employees. So just to give you a few examples of some overarching projects I might work on is right now, once COVID hit, we've been on max telework. So folks haven't been coming to the office for almost 2 years now. And we thought this would be an incredible opportunity for us to change the way our space looks in Atlanta. So partly, most of our folks are going to end up being telework. So they're not going to come to the office, but maybe once or twice a week. And a lot of folks are going to be only touching down, not having physical office space anymore. So one project I've been really heavily involved in is basically how do we reduce the cost and how do we change what our space looks like? How do we both make it safe for COVID protocols as we come back to the office, but also change it to make it more collaborative and just a better place to come work at, whenever you do come to the office. So kind of leading that space program change initiative has been one big part. I also helped stand up a regional mentoring program, for example, where we had a mentoring program in the past, and it had kind of fallen dormant for a few years. So I had a chance to kind of revamp it, look at everything we've done before, and now kind of create this new regional mentorship program that connects new employees and folks in the service to either higher ranking folks who can give great perspective and advice. And I'm also heavily involved in a lot of the student hiring, which is probably part of the reason I'm on this call right now, is that I've been doing a lot of work, establishing pathways for if you're a student who comes in through a pathway student and you want to, establishing a portal. So establishing portal for folks who are in the pathways program. So if you come join as a pathways and you're having trouble finding a position, you can enter that portal we're creating, and that portal will allow you to be seen by other supervisors or program managers in the service, and they'll have a very easy way to find you, kind of look at your experience, your background, and make contact with you and then interview you and hopefully bring you on for a full-time permanent position. So I'll stop there. I do a lot of other things in service, but I'm sure we'll get there as Terry asks us follow-up questions. Hope that wasn't too off the wall, but once again, as Leo mentioned in the chat, I'm happy to reach out to anyone or talk to anyone. I'll link my LinkedIn as well, but happy to have any follow-up conversations following this presentation. So I'll give it back to Terry now.
There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you, Leo, for that wonderful insight. Thank you, Silmarie, for the insight. Thank you, Nick, for the insight as well. You all did such a great job in answering everything. I had a list of questions to follow up, but in your presentations, you actually answered everything that I was going to ask. So thank you for that. And we got a couple of questions in the excuse me, in the chat, and so we've been trying to answer those. But in the interest of time, we're going to move on. We've got 2 more presentations, and we want Monica Williams and Chris DeVore we want them to have the opportunity to present the information that they have for us on the National Wildlife Refuge System and science applications and migratory birds. So with that, oh no, Nick, you're fine. everybody was great. Thank you for that, like I said, but we're going to transition now to the program presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Monica Williams. Monica, please, excuse me, tell us just a little bit about yourself and where you are, and you can proceed into your presentation.
All right, sounds great. I'm going to share my presentation here. Just get my screen a little better here. There we go, so I can see. Okay. And I'm guessing everyone can see my presentation. Again, I am Monica Williams, and I am stationed here in South Carolina as the refuge manager at Santee National Wildlife Refuge. And so my task this morning is to talk a little bit more about the National Wildlife Refuge System. Let me get in presentation mode there. Also, just very briefly, I just want to let you know I have degrees in biology and also a bachelor's degree in biology and a master's degree in marine and environmental science. I started my career with the Fish and Wildlife Service, what seems like a very long time ago. But again, I started with one of the programs that was in place at that time, which at that time it was called the Student Career Experience Program. And I've just listed some of the things that I've been able to accomplish, some of the opportunities that I've had during my time working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So as you've already heard this morning, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is one of the bureaus that's in the U.S. Department of the Interior. And within the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, we have several programs, which Terry discussed this morning. And I'm going to talk about the National Wildlife Refuge System. And that's basically where my experience has been during my career. So the National Wildlife Refuge System was established back in 1903 by President Theodore Roosevelt. And it started it started as a migratory bird refuge to conserve some species that were of concern because of overconsumption at the time. The mission of the National Wildlife Refuge System, we are a network of land and waters. As Terry mentioned, we're over 150 million acres, but land and water for conservation, management, and restoration of fish, wildlife, plants, and their habitats within the United States for present and future generations of America. So that is our mission. Within the National Wildlife Refuge System, we have 568 national wildlife refuges across the country, and I'm going to show you a map and talk a little bit more about that. Not only are there national wildlife refuges in the system, we also have wetland management districts, and we also have some marine national monuments that also exist and are part of our network. One thing I'm really excited about is that on next Monday, March the 14th, the National Wildlife Refuge System will be celebrating its 119th birthday. Okay, so again, we were established March 14th, 1903. So we're 119 years old as of next Monday. So here is a map. This map might not be the most up to date, but it does show what I needed to show today. And that's to let you see the entire United States. And these little black dots that you see, they represent national wildlife refuges across the United States. And there is at least one refuge in each state. Not only are we within the United States, we're also in the continental United States, but also in Alaska, in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Hawaii, and also in the Caribbean islands. So land acres, we're 95 million land acres, 760 million acres of submerged lands and waters. We're in all 50 states and 5 US territories for the National Wildlife Refuge System. So now I just want to talk a little bit more about what we do on national wildlife refuges. And one of the things that we're responsible for, obviously, is managing habitat for wildlife. And so on national wildlife refuges, each refuge is going to be a little bit different based on the purpose of that refuge, why it was established, and also based on the habitats that they have. But we have a variety of habitats that we're managing on national wildlife refuges. We manage forests, we manage grasslands and fields. We manage all types of wetlands, be it marshes or man-made wetlands like impoundments or natural wetlands. So we're managing water levels in certain cases. We're also doing a lot of work with non-native invasive species. We have several species that are now invasive, and so they are competition. They're within competition of some of our native species. So trying to manage and control those invasive species is a lot of what we do. And we have invasive species management that we're doing both kind of in terrestrial areas as well as in our aquatic wetland systems as well. Some of the tools that we use for habitat management and restoration include things like prescribed fire. So that means that we're setting fires on purpose so that we can improve and enhance wildlife habitat. We also have tools where we're mowing, for an example. We might use tractors or other types of equipment to mow areas, sometimes in order to manage the habitat and keep it in a suitable state so that it will be beneficial to the wildlife that need to use those particular habitats. And in some cases, we're also farming. And you might say, well, why would we be farming on national wildlife refuges? So in the case where I am at Santee National Wildlife Refuge here in South Carolina, the refuge itself does some farming, but we also work with some local farmers. So we have cooperative farming programs. And the idea is that by farming, we're providing supplemental food or additional food for the wildlife species. So here at Santee, we're a big refuge for wintering waterfowl, all kinds of ducks and geese and swans. And so by farming, we're just adding some additional food in addition to the natural foods. Our farming helps to provide some additional food so that we can provide for those waterfowl while they're with us during the winter, as well as other migratory birds while they're with us during certain times of the year. So again, you can see some pictures of some of the tools that we're using and some of the habitat management that we have going on, be it prescribed fires, be it using tractors to plant crops. Some of the crops that we plant include things like corn and rice and wheat, sometimes also millet and other types of grains that again, wildlife and waterfowl will benefit from. That picture on the bottom is actually a picture where we're working with some cooperative some of our conservation partners in terms of invasive species management. And because we're in an aquatic system and we're on a lake system, using a helicopter sometimes is the most feasible and the safest way, the most effective way to apply herbicides when we need to control certain types of invasive species. Okay, and then the picture on the bottom just shows these are water control structures, and that's a way for us to manage water levels. And we manage water levels based again on the wildlife that we have using the refuge, and also based on certain times of the year. So during the winter time, so during say November, December, January, and February, when we have lots of ducks and geese on the refuge, we want to make sure that the water levels are up, that there's plenty of water there for the ducks and geese, and also plenty of food that will be available for them in the water column and the water bottom. And then during the spring and summer times of the year, we will reduce those water levels so that we can get in smaller birds. So things like wading birds, herons and egrets and shorebirds, which are smaller, and they have some different requirements, and they also need to be able to actually reach the bottom. So by reducing the water levels, we'll have mud flats and sand flats that are exposed for them so they can get to worms and invertebrates and insects and things of that sort. Also on national wildlife refuges, since we're managing for species and managing habitat, it is important that we do a lot of inventory and monitoring. And so that takes place in the form of doing various kinds of surveys. So surveys for the wildlife, be it bird surveys, be it surveys for insects, be it surveys for fish, doing surveys in different kinds of counts. Another way that we're able to monitor wildlife populations is by banding. So we've done banding with bats. That's what you see there in that top picture. One of the refuges that I worked at, we had the opportunity to do some research on the northern long-eared bat, which is a threatened species that's listed in our endangered species under the endangered species protection. And so by being able to capture the bats and do some banding of them so that way we can keep track of their movements, what habitats they're using, age, and that sort of thing. And we do the same thing with birds. So things like ducks and some other songbirds also we will band. We also have nest boxes that we use on national wildlife refuges, and nest boxes help to supplement habitat as well. One of the things that we're probably all dealing with, most land management agencies are dealing with, habitat loss. A lot of these species don't have the abundance of habitat that they used to have. And so with deforestation and just development in general, having nest boxes again provides additional habitat for certain kinds of birds and certain species. And so we can install those nest boxes on refuges and then monitor them to see how they're doing, things like wood ducks and other birds. And then we're also collecting a lot of habitat data. I think someone talked about soils, and so it's important that as we manage for wildlife and habitat, that we think about the habitat conditions. Those habitat conditions have to be right, and they have to be healthy for wildlife. So we're out doing things like collecting water quality data. One of the pictures that you see there, you see it looks like I'm laying on an aluminum plank, and what we're actually doing is we're actually collecting some data in the salt marsh. And so we're looking at rates for accretion and looking at rates for erosion in the salt marshes and looking at the habitat in general. So looking at soils and waters, all those kinds of things are important, and looking at the quality of them, all those kinds of things are important as we manage for various types of wildlife species. And I love this job because not only do we get to work with a variety of habitats, we get to work with a variety of wildlife. So I mentioned things like bats and migratory birds and even horseshoe crabs and fish, and other types of aquatic species, and also things like reptiles and amphibians and mammals too. We try to cover the gamut and do as much as we can. And then also on national wildlife refuges, there are some cases where, certain species or in certain cases, we may not be able to do hands-on management, but just the fact that we are a national wildlife refuge, we do provide some conservation. We do provide, opportunities just to conserve and at least protect species. And so one of the ways that we do this is through just having protected lands where we know there will be no development or those kinds of things. And so these pictures here show some of the species that we help to conserve and protect. There are a lot more that cover the gamut in terms of what we do on national wildlife refuges. But where I'm in South Carolina, as I mentioned, we're an important refuge for waterfowl, for ducks and geese. And so at certain times of the year when they're here during the winter, they need places where there's less disturbance, where they can feed, where they can spend time during their migration, where they can get the food and the habitat resources that they need. I worked on a refuge, worked at several refuges in Long Island, and on that bottom picture, you can see I'm on a beach because there's some habitats such as beaches that we might need to close off during the nesting season so that birds like piping plover and other types of shorebirds can have areas that are safe. Areas that are safe from vehicles, areas that are safe from dogs and predators. And so by being on a national wildlife refuge, we can put these seasonal closures in place for times, for those, especially those sensitive times. And we have all kinds of cooperative partnerships. So be it, working with migratory birds, be it, closing off habitats so that species can have refuge and have sanctuary periods of disturbance. That beautiful pink flower that you see there is the sandplain gerardia. That was one that was listed and protected in the Endangered Species Act, has since been lifted. But the important point is that, by being on a national wildlife refuge, we're able to protect that habitat and protect that particular species, do the counts, do the habitat management that was needed, but also have areas that were close to the public so that we didn't trample the plant or do things that would harm the plant, but so that we could do things that would encourage the populations to grow. On national wildlife refuges, we have to have, of course, equipment and facilities. And so the Fish and Wildlife provides those kinds of things for us so that we're able to do our job, so that we're able to manage habitats and protect species. So we have all kinds of equipment that we use, to do different projects to make sure the habitat, again, is good. If there's a ditch that might be clogged, we have equipment operators who can go out and use the machinery that is needed to do that, machines to plant, machines so that we're able to pump and move water when we need to draw water levels down, but also when we need to make sure that water levels are up to their fullest. And at the top there's a small picture of the visitor center. Most refuges will have some type of visitor center or visitor contact station. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about visitors pretty soon, but those will all be the kinds of things that we have so that we're able to do our job. And at the bottom there's a picture of our maintenance shop. the place where we keep tools and equipment and vehicles and those kinds of things, again, so that we're able to do our job and manage national wildlife refuges. Just really quickly, I just want to touch on some of the positions that you might find on national wildlife refuges. As I mentioned, I have the privilege of being a refuge manager, but we also have biologists on refuges. Some of them are wildlife biologists. Some might be what we call general biologists. We have maintenance workers. We have heavy equipment operators, folks who can operate tractors and bulldozers and other kinds of equipment to do habitat work. We have visitor services park rangers, and those are the folks who are able to, work with schools, work with scout groups, also to work with volunteers and coordinate having volunteers to do work on the refuge, and also just to kind of be that voice for the refuge and help to ensure that we have that face with the public and have that conversation with the public. So we have visitor services folks who work on our refuges. We also have federal wildlife officers. I think someone mentioned in a presentation earlier about we have refuge law enforcement. We also have an office of law enforcement, but basically these folks are officers to make sure that wildlife laws, conservation laws are followed. Also to make sure that species are protected based on different acts or different laws, different legislation that will protect them. So these officers help to enforce that, but they're also a face on refuges as well to answer questions and be there to talk to folks and to keep the properties and assets safe. We have a variety of administrative professionals who help with our budgets, who help with other administrative tasks, keeping our offices and paperwork and records and things of that sort straight. We work with realty professionals and realty specialists. National wildlife refuges, we're always looking for opportunities so that we can acquire additional lands in which to conserve for wildlife habitat. We have prescribed fire specialists who help to implement these prescribed fires that I mentioned that happen on refuges. It's a lot of coordination, but just making sure that fires are controlled, that they're done in the proper time, the proper season. We have foresters, we have boat operators, and several others, but I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the positions, some of the job positions that you'll find on national wildlife refuges. And then also I just want to talk lastly about, I talked a lot about habitat and wildlife, but I also want to talk about people and how national wildlife refuges provide services for people. And so, each refuge, again, is going to be a little bit different in terms of the kinds of activities that might be allowed on a refuge. But what we have here, this is called the Big Six for the National Wildlife Refuge System. And the Big Six are these activities that you see here with this check mark. And these are what we call fish and wildlife oriented type of activities. And so these activities are compatible, and these are the activities that we encourage people to do. And so it meshes really well with what we're trying to do on national wildlife refuges and allows people ways so that they can experience the refuge, experience the wildlife, and be able to view them. So things like hunting and fishing, wildlife observation, photography, doing environmental education with groups, as I mentioned, school groups, local community groups and such, and then also interpretation. And so interpretation might, involve a park ranger going out and kind of interpreting and talking about some of the programs, some of the things that we do on refuges, but also the signage that we have, so that when people come to visit refuges, so that they can be oriented and understand and see, interpretive panels and learn more about the refuge. So lots of nice pictures here, hunters on the refuge, people boating, people just enjoying the scenery, fishing, all those kinds of things are public uses that we have on national wildlife refuges. And then finally, not my final slide, second to the last slide, lots of partnerships on national wildlife refuges. In general, we can't do any work really without working with other people. So we have a lot of great partnerships. We work with other agencies, be it other federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies. We welcome volunteers to help us with some of our day-to-day assignments, helping with biological surveys, helping with maintenance tasks, helping plant wildflower gardens, whatever the case might be. So volunteers are really important. And some of our refuges also have what we call friends groups. And friends groups are assigned to a specific national wildlife refuge. And they just kind of, again, they help the refuge with support, be it logistical support for doing different projects and assignments, but they also just help to advocate for the refuge. And so I just wanted to mention some of these really important partnerships that we have. We have partnerships that help us to be able to conduct research so that we can learn more about species, learn about their habitat requirements, learn about what's going on with them. We work with tribes, Native American tribes, and lots of other groups and partnerships that we have. So I definitely just wanted to mention them quickly. And then finally, my last slide here, in my career with the Fish and Wildlife Service for over 20 years, I feel really, really thankful. That's why I have all these emojis here. I feel really thankful for this opportunity. I feel really blessed, you know, all the experiences that I've had, all the people that I get to meet, and the fact that I get to, you know, have a job that allows me to do something that I enjoy and really make a difference in the conservation world. So for the Fish and Wildlife Service, I would say I give it a 2 thumbs up. It's the only federal agency that I've worked for, and I plan on staying with the Fish and Wildlife Service, but I've had some really, really great opportunities. Like with anything, there are going to be some challenges, there are going to be some ups and some downs, but working together as teams, having really great support system, all those things have made a difference in my life. And so I'm grateful for having the opportunity to come in as a student and then just further my career over these past 20 years. So that ends my presentation on the National Wildlife Refuge System. If anyone has questions later, either Terry can direct us or you're welcome to reach out to me later on. Thanks for your time and attention.
Monica, thank you so very much for that informative presentation. I hope everyone learned something about the National Wildlife Refuge System. That was great. We are going to move to our last presentation from Chris DeVore. He's going to talk to us a little bit about science applications and migratory birds. So I'll turn it over to Chris. Thanks.
Sounds good. Good morning. All right, I'm going to share my other screen here. Hoping you see full page. Is that working for everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, awesome.
Yes.
Well, first of all, Monica, Nick, Marie, and a couple others are all on a Gateway Initiative team together. And the Gateway Initiative works with student programs here in the Southeast. So Monica, from those pictures on your slides, I think we figured out when we have our first in-person meeting together where we're going to be meeting. And it's an awesome refuge there and really cool work you guys are getting done. In terms of my presentation and in terms of the time that we have left, I think we have 15, 20 minutes. I am going to streamline this a decent bit just to make sure that others after me have some time to present their material as well. So I'm going to be talking about landscape conservation here in the Southeast region. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. This is a really cool forum that is put together here to talk about the Fish and Wildlife Service. And for my presentation, I did want to talk again about landscape conservation and my route to get to this role. And I'm going to keep that pretty quick, but just being relatively early in my career, I think it might be relatable for the audience here. So again, I don't want to dive too deep into my background, but I do want to reinforce some of what we heard earlier with a couple of takeaways from my background. So I'm currently a biologist in Cookeville, Tennessee in our science applications program, but I have not always been a biologist. I started in the Fish and Wildlife Service with a business degree. I saw that was one of the questions in the chat. And Nick and I both have that in common. It was only later that I went back and I got a master's in natural resources. But through both of those degrees, I was able to get experience in 2 of the services internship programs, the SCEP. We talked about the Student Career Experience Program turned into Pathways Program. So the Pathways Program and the Directorate Fellowship Program. And eventually those 2 internships led to full-time work in Maryland, Maine, and now I'm in Tennessee. And I wanted to share this for 2 reasons, 2 takeaways. It's not always a direct route to find full-time job, whether it's with the service or just in the government, but there's a number of routes to do it. So just keep that in mind if you are looking. And we're not all biologists. There's a number of really cool positions here in the service that go beyond the traditional biologist. And I'm going to use the next slide to give you a good idea of that. Thinking you might have seen this. This shows the majority of fish and wildlife programs here in the Southeast region. And although they're their own hexagons, they are all connected in some manner. And I highlighted 2 in particular. So in my short time here, my 10 years, I've spent the majority of my time with ecological services and more recently with science applications in migratory birds. So I'm just going to really briefly touch on ecological services and then jump into my current work. Ecological services, we have 2 experts here already with Leo and Marie. So again, going to keep this short, but they do a ton of varied work throughout the nation. They house all the field offices. So if you hear the Tennessee field office, Florida field office, they house all the field offices and have nearly one in every state, if not more. And the canned language on this slide says that Ecological Services administers the Endangered Species Act, which is true, but a lot more falls under the umbrella. For example, in Maryland, I worked in the coastal program where we worked to build up coastal watersheds for resiliency and adaptability to climate change, which of course doesn't necessarily, it does tie with T&E species, threatened and endangered species, but it doesn't, not necessarily covered by that definition. In Maine, I did have a much more traditional endangered species role, and it was a regulatory role. And I personally, full honesty, I was worried. I was like, this might be a heavy paperwork job, but it wasn't. I was able to get in the field a ton, work with federal and state partners. We worked primarily with Atlantic salmon in Maine and improving their habitat through culvert replacements and projects of the sort. So I wanted to just share that background and my experience with the Ecological Services program. And those are just two programs under that larger ES umbrella. In terms of my current work, again, I work for Science Apps and Migratory Birds. There's canned language on the slide. That's the two check marks you see there. But I kept it, it is very appropriate. And our two groups here work very closely on landscape conservation. So I'm more on the science application side of the house. And we provide science support internally to all of our programs, but externally to our state and federal partners as well. And our external support is primarily through SECUS. SECUS is the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, and it's a Southeast-wide program, and it's a partnership of state, federal, and NGO partners. They have a goal, SECUS has a goal, for 10% improvement in the health, function, and connectivity of the Southeast by 2060. That's the goal that you see there at the bottom of the slide. And the means that SECUS has to do this is through a spatial tool they have called the Southeast Blueprint. So my role, I call myself a biologist, a conservation adaptation specialist. Blueprint user support is another title that I go by. And this is the blueprint. So the blueprint is a living spatial plan that identifies important places for conservation and restoration across the Southeast and in the Caribbean. You'll see two shades of blue on this map here. So you have the darker blue, which is considered the higher conservation value. So these are areas that are most important for ecosystem health, function, and connectivity. And then the medium is that the medium conservation value is that lighter blue that you see there. I consider that more your buffering and your potentially restoration areas, but they're really important to connect the larger network in the landscape vision. So put in most basic terms, the blue is where that we hope ourselves and our partners are focusing a lot of their efforts, because if everyone's playing from a similar playbook, we can all have a larger collective impact by stacking the work that we're doing. In terms of why it is blue and what makes it blue, what's baked into the blueprint are indicators. So this is a list of indicators that we're looking up for this upcoming year. As I mentioned, the blueprint is a living plan, so it is updated every year. We're trying to refine it and trying to improve it based on new data. You'll probably notice that some of what's listed here is much more relevant in some geographies than other geographies. And so we do have positions like mine. I'm in Tennessee, but we have positions just like mine in North Carolina, in Puerto Rico, in Florida, who can help our partners figure out why their area is blue, why it might not be blue, how to act on it, and how to help use their vision and their goals to help with the larger network that we're all aiming for. So that is my role. My job, another way to put it, is to introduce people to the blueprint and ideally incorporate it in their work in some manner. So the blueprint has been around since 2016. And in that time, we've worked with over 250 people at 100 organizations. And I say we, I've only been around for about 2 years. So my number is much smaller than that, but collectively we've ended up working with a number of people and a number of organizations. So this table that I'm sharing here, it's not an official table. It's not an official communication tool or anything like that. I just made this for myself last year, and it shows the different ways that the blueprint can be used. And for an example, I'll give you 2 examples. In the last year, I've used it to, and then if you look at the first column in the middle, avoid areas of high conservation importance. Right now, I'm working on a project with Arkansas state partners in our field office to create a map of best and worst places to place wind energy development based on the blueprint and a number of other factors. So that's one way that the blueprint can be used. Another example I'll give you, if you look at the second column, you see support grant proposals. Last year, we worked with Cherokee National Forest and 15 other partners to help build a proposal for restoration in the forest. And we used the blueprint to say, this is why it's important in this corridor, this blue corridor that you see. And that proposal was funded for just over $5 million over 3 years. So a couple different ways that you can use the blueprint, and our partners like using the blueprint, of course, too, to be able to justify a lot of their work. And personally, I enjoy it a lot. It's really collaborative. You get to meet new people, new partners, and it's proactive conservation. You're getting out ahead of some of these issues. And the last thing that I'll add in terms of the blueprint and this work is that we're doing this here in the Southeast. We're building a model here, but other regions are doing it as well. We're all learning from each other. So we're hoping to build this model and build it out in the Northeast and the Southwest. So collectively, once again, having a larger impact. And for my last slide, you're going to get way more of this information from the rest of the people on this call, the rest of the Fish and Wildlife crew. So I'm not going to go too far into the resources, but that's why I kept this slide. My contact information is in the top left there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. More than happy to help and talk about some of the programs. And hopefully you got something out of this and seeing the little case studies in our larger fish and wildlife programs. And that is all for me.
Thank you, Christopher, so much. And thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Silmarie. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Monica, for all of your insight and everything that you all have provided during this symposium. And, we're certainly excited to have everyone who joined today. Thank you, Fabiola, for partnering with us and giving us this opportunity to present. I just have one thing to add before we jump off. We have just a couple of minutes. I wanted to make everybody aware of an internship opportunity that we have available. It's going to take place. I'm just going to give you a brief little introduction to the internship program, and then I'll provide supplemental information to everyone afterwards. But it's an internship program that's going to take place at the the Crystal River National Wildlife Refuge complex in Crystal River, Florida. And they are specifically wanting to host an intern from Puerto Rico. So we're excited to make that internship opportunity available. And this refuge in the wintertime hosts Florida manatees. So that's a pretty awesome opportunity. But during the summertime, when the internship is available, the manatees will be out in the Gulf. So the refuge manager wanted me to let you know that this candidate must be able to tolerate the Florida summer and heat. So if you're used to the heat in Puerto Rico, then I'm sure you'll do just fine with the Florida heat. Be able to interact with visitors. So you'll be responsible for doing some level of interaction with the public in their visitor services area. And so there are opportunities, obviously, to speak Spanish to the visitors at the refuge, and also be comfortable in a kayak and standing for long periods of time. So you'll be, giving presentations most likely to the public on land or also in the water. But I can also provide, like I said, some more information about that program. But I just wanted to put that in your ear. And with that, again, thank you, everybody. As Fabiola mentioned at the beginning, we did record this presentation, and all of the presentations that Monica gave, that Chris gave, and then we have another presentation on USA Jobs and federal resumes we're going to provide that for you as well, so you'll have access to that. So once again, muchísimas gracias a todos, a todas, y I'll turn it back over to Fabiola.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to say this part in English. So as part of conservation opportunity, to the panelists, Terry Whitaker, Rachel McCracken, Cherry Brewer, Courtney Williams, Rhonda Spinks, Leo Miranda, Marie Padron, Christopher DeVore, Monica Williams, and Nicholas Bird, for a big thanks for their participation and commitment to the professional improvement of people interested in working with environmental conservation. And of course, thanks to all of you, the participants, for your time, interest, and availability this Tuesday. So yeah, everyone, I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Adios.
Bye. Adiós.
Gracias. Bye bye.